attached to her. So
I know, isn't this nice? This is really
so
helpful
cheap.
for me.
Yeah. We need to think about that.
Yeah. Let's see.
You're often getting up from our desk, walking away, having to turn around and come back.
Yeah, no, it's just on me all the time. It helps. All right. So, as you are probably aware, but just in case, this is about mental discipline. So what does that bring to mind? What does that mean? It's like to-do lists, you never procrastinate, you're like on top of it all the time, no worries. You have motivation constantly, or there's like that one person, like in the slideshow, there's that one person that you try not to hate because they have it together all the time and they get so much done and like they seem nice, but also like, I hate that person. So like we all know that person. So is mental discipline the same thing as motivation, or is it something else? Wanted to talk about executive functioning as part of this presentation because I think it's important to have an understanding of what that is, and perhaps it can offer some compassion if we understand what that is. So executive functioning, it happens in our prefrontal cortex, and it's the ability to plan, focus our attention, remember instructions, hold things in our mind at like more than one thing at a time. It motivates us to continue with the task when there's not an immediate payoff. It helps us regulate our emotions, motivate ourselves, and it sounds like what we would describe as mental discipline. So then what is executive dysfunction? Well, that's kind of like it sounds. We find it a lot in people who are diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues, but we may also recognize some of these things in ourselves. A lot of us deal with this on some level some of the time. And what that looks like, it can look like time blindness, which is essentially like you sort of forget about time, or you almost forget the way time works, or that you have to be somewhere at a certain time. It's like, you know that you have to leave at 7:45 to get to work on time, but then at 7:40, you're like, why don't I just clean out my fridge? And then it's 7:50 and now you're kind of late. It's like, how did this even happen? It can look like trouble focusing on your tasks, trouble completing them. It can look like trouble getting started, even with things that you really want to do and things that would bring you joy if you did them. You're just sort of sitting there frozen, like scrolling on your phone, like, why don't I do that thing? I know that I want to do that thing. I would love to do that thing. It makes me happy to do that thing. Why can't I stop doing this? Why can't I stop doing this and do that thing? This is executive dysfunction. It's easy to get distracted, difficulty to sustain attention, and difficult to regulate your emotions and impulses. So like I said, this happens in the front of your brain, prefrontal cortex, which is not, like I think we covered the limbic system a little bit one of the times I was here last. So this is like adult brain stuff. This is rational, reasonable, adult brain stuff. Fun thing, motivation is biological. They did some functional MRI scans of the brains of different people and found that different activities, I'm gonna mute somebody, different activities activated the reward systems in different people. So, for example, like the kid who can't pay attention in class but can sit in front of a video game for 4 hours. Or the person who zones out during a conversation, but she can like get into a spreadsheet and spend 2 hours getting that spreadsheet done. It's kind of like that. Different things light up our reward systems in different ways. And the reward center needs to be activated before it'll tell the prefrontal cortex that something is worth paying attention to. And that's when the prioritizing function of executive function kicks in and says, okay, this is something that is a reward center thing. This is something that I want to do. Let's get it going. It's the one that sustains the prefrontal cortex, like we already said. And if it's not online, or if it's impaired in some way, like we're anxious, freaked out about something, if we are angry or upset about something, it's really hard to sustain motivation. Nope. There we go. So just to make this point real quick, that's been made hundreds of times, we have access to the internet all the time now, and distraction is very easy these days. And I think it'd be fair to say that most of us, especially now, especially these days, feel overwhelmed and unfocused a lot of the time, or at least I'm speaking for myself. And we become used to the instant dopamine hits of being able to switch from one thing to another. If there's something that we want to look up, we can look it up. Oh, look, I did that. I Googled that thing and now I know. Great. Okay, moving on. And we don't have a lot of practice having to sustain our attention, just in the way that our lives are set up by default. And also our brains were developed to make sense of the environment as it was thousands and thousands of years ago. And yet we've got this like 10,000-year-old brain stuck in 2020, just trying to figure out like, what to pay attention to and what's going on. So procrastination. It often gets framed as laziness, but it's not that all the time. Sometimes it's a fear of failure. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes there's something else going on. It's like, have you ever been in a situation where you know that you needed to get something done, but instead you cleaned your kitchen? That's not laziness. That's avoidance. And so our brains do like to get things done. And that's one of the things that lights up our reward system. And yet we procrastinate on things that we are telling ourselves are a priority. So some reasons that we might procrastinate are you don't know what to do, you don't know how to take the next step, or you just don't feel like doing it. And there are reasons other than laziness why that might be. So when we get a task, we might feel overwhelmed. And then our fear of failure might kick in, or our perfectionism might kick in. We might feel anxious about how it'll turn out. We might want it to be really perfect. We might feel intimidated about how to get started, or how do I start? This is gonna take a long time. How am I gonna get all this done? And we want to avoid that discomfort, which is only natural. It is natural for us to want to avoid discomfort and go towards things which are comfortable. And yet, procrastination does create anxiety, which makes us want to avoid it more, which creates more anxiety, and then some shame. And so throw that on the pile, and then on and on and on and on. But unfortunately, as I've had to learn the hard way, avoiding something doesn't make it go away. And the task itself is not really what causes the anxiety. It's the having to do the task. And so I kind of have been thinking of procrastination almost like a freeze response. We kind of went through fight, flight, freeze last time. It almost feels to me sometimes like I don't know. So how do we improve mental discipline and deal with procrastination? So I wanted to start here with mindfulness. We do have to be aware of the present before we can alter it in any way. And attention itself is one of our most valuable resources. It is something that corporations strive to get from us at all times. It's something that if someone's trying to sell you something, they need your attention. It's something that our employers pay us for, is for our attention. It's a really valuable resource, and we become more like what we pay attention to. And what we practice grows stronger. And so it is interesting to think about, what are the things that I pay attention to every day? And what are those things like? And are they more like the things that I want to be, or are they less like that? Are they more unlike the things that I want to be? The thoughts that you pay attention to, the thoughts that you engage with, what are those? And what happens, what kind of things are you avoiding? paying attention to? What are those? Just questions to consider. There's a thing I found out about, which I thought was pretty cool. Dr. Amen created something called the one-page miracle. What it is you set your goals for your life on one page, like in every aspect. I think there's stuff like money and employment and family and relationships and spirituality and just all of it. And you put it on a piece of paper, put it somewhere you can see it, and you read it every day. Side note, physical reminders are helpful for people, especially with ADHD, to get things out of the brain and where they can see them. And so a physical reminder can be really helpful in assisting the brain with holding something there so that you can pay attention to it, if that makes sense. And so when you read it every day and you keep those goals in the forefront of your mind, it does help you prioritize. It allows your brain to tell the difference between what you really want and then what you just want right now. And you can ask yourself as you check in with these goals, is my current behavior getting me closer to what I want? Yeah, I'll come back to that later. I also wanted to mention, not that I'm trying to do a plug for Jordan's class, but I mean, if I am, I am. Physical activity is a strategy for improving learning power. So if you increase your heart rate, you increase your learning power. And this is some really cool science that has come out about this. Here in the slideshow, I'll just read it. A study in Japan found that jogging for 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week for 12 weeks improved executive functioning. However, it is also important to include some complex movements. So anything more complex than walking. Walking is something that we just kind of do. But if it's something like balancing or figuring something out or moving in a way that you've never moved before, it helps with the effects of the aerobic exercise. So there's a thing about rats in here that, it's brain stuff. I don't know. Essentially what I mean is aerobic exercise increased the neurotransmitters, created new blood vessels, spawns new cells, while complex activities put all of that material to use by strengthening and expanding the networks. Cool thing, the attention and movement share overlapping pathways. And so even though new pathways and new connections are made through movement, they can be used and applied to other areas in the brain used for learning and thinking, which is really cool. So when you learn new movements, those new connections and new skills can work to improve the functioning of your brain overall. And so that's really good to know, because our brains get a little more able to pay attention and learn right after physical activity. And so we're going to come back to this later too, just to mention it, but to really drill it home, if you've got something that you really need to focus on and pay attention to, do it after you work out. Your brain is going to be more able to receive that information and pay attention to that information. But it doesn't even have to be really intense working out. It can be like, there's this study here from Arthur Kramer University that showed that walking even 3 days a week for 6 months increased the volume of the prefrontal cortex in older adults. And they all showed improvement in executive functions. That's really good news. And also, bonus, the practice of completing a physical routine can help us develop our willpower, which again, is something that we, by default, normally don't get a lot of opportunity to practice. But if you apply it to one thing, it'll translate. And I had to mention meditation. I had to do it because our brains do add relevant connections and gray matter to things that we do often. It wants it to be easier for us to do the things that we do all the time. So the more that you practice willpower, the more that you practice meditation, the easier it will get, the better you'll become at it. And one of the most effective ways to practice willpower is meditation. And it is something, if you were going to have 2 people and say one person meditates for 2 hours once a week versus the other person who meditates for 20 minutes every day. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. The person who meditates for 20 minutes every day is going to see more of a benefit than that person who does that marathon session one time in their whole week. So it needs to be a practice, but the practice of returning to presence instead of like following whatever thoughts pop up is good practice for paying attention. It translates to being able to learn and pay attention. And study in 2012 showed that the changes in brain activity in those who learn to meditate continue and remain steady even when the subjects are not meditating. So it's like when you do bicep curls for a long time and your bicep gets bigger, it's still big even when you're not curling. So like, let it grow. It'll work for you. It'll be effective. Change happened in the amygdala, which is fight or flight. It becomes less activated. And if the amygdala and the limbic system is not activated, our prefrontal cortex can do what it needs to do. So, how to deal with it in the moment. Part of what can be helpful is to figure out if you're procrastinating because you don't know the next step or if you just don't want to do the thing. So if you don't know the next step, decide what you're supposed to be doing and break it down into small, specific steps. Write it out. It really does make a difference to get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. And then you can take the next step. So by small, specific steps, I mean like if you just write down, create the presentation that you're going to present. That's kind of big. And that's sort of, when I look at that, I think, I don't really, that's a big goal. I know that is what I ultimately want to do, but I feel like I'd rather clean my light fixtures right now, which is true. That is what I did. They look great. It's very bright in my kitchen now. So what is more helpful is to create a goal of like, do 5 slides. That's more approachable. That's measurable. That's specific. That's a number. I can like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I am done. Because if I just have create the presentation because you like presentations and you like doing workshops, I might never feel finished. Like I could keep adding to this until this presentation is like 90 minutes long and we're all stuck here like, I'd rather clean my light fixtures than sit here for 90 minutes. So small steps, reasonable steps, specific, write it out. If you still don't want to do it after you know the next step to take, maybe there's another reason you don't want to do it. So if anxiety is getting in the way, why am I feeling anxious? Or am I hungry? Am I just bored? Once you figure that out, address the issue. You might meditate, take a walk, make a snack. If you're worried about the future or spinning out about the future, bring back the reasonable adult. Some of you may remember that reasonable adult from a previous workshop where we talked about child and the parent and then the reasonable adult. Allow that reasonable adult rather than the parent who's going to shame and like, why aren't you doing one? Allow the reasonable adult to come back and say, it would actually be impossible for you to figure everything out all at once, so it's fine if that's not what you do today. We're not here to figure out everything all at once. We're here to just do like these specific little tasks right here. That's manageable. You can do this because you are an adult and you are capable of this. And if you're bored, I don't know, play music while you work. Do a little something. Do something to get that part of your brain that needs stimulation to like occupy itself while you do whatever you need to get done. Once the issue is addressed, try it again. Diffusion. Diffusion is a concept in acceptance and commitment therapy that can help us gain perspective on our thoughts and beliefs. So we approach our thoughts and beliefs as though we were impartial observers. So rather than I am anxious, try I notice that I am feeling anxious. Or rather than I'll never get this done, I notice I'm having the thought that I will never get this done. And when we come at it from that angle, from that reasonable adult angle, we can evidence test it. We can find evidence for and against. We can say, is that true? Has every project that I've ever started never gotten finished? Well, no, I have finished projects before, and I'm quite capable of finishing projects again. And that way it can help us to not spin out and get into a place of shame, blaming ourselves, and perfectionism. 5-minute trick. So if you're doing all that stuff and you still feel stuck, just try starting for 5 minutes. You have complete permission to stop after 5. If that timer goes off and 5 minutes is up and you're like, I still hate this, then you have permission to stop and come at it again another time. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe it's not the right day. But more than likely, once you get started, you might feel like finishing, because just, why not? I'm here. I'm already in it. Or the timer might go off and you might think, well, that went really fast. I'll just set another quick little timer here. Great. You might try starting badly on purpose. If perfectionism is your thing and the trap that you fall into, flip it around. Turn it on its head. Start out really badly. Fail gloriously, like spectacularly bad. If you gotta write something, just like write the worst sentence you can think of and just read it aloud to yourself and say, well, it started. It's not a blank page anymore. There's something there. And so at least, this is the worst it can get. That's not that bad. Okay, let's go from here. Find the right time. For most of us, according to our circadian rhythm, the most productive hours of our day are between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Those are our really productive hours for working, like mind work. But it might be a different time for you, depending on your own personal circadian rhythm. And like I said, if you're doing the physical activity thing, do your hardest mental work right after you've gotten your heart rate up, like within the first couple of hours after you do that. And then find the right space. Where do you get your best work done? Do you like for there to be sort of ambient noise of people talking around you? Does it need to be quiet? Do you need daylight? Does it need to be dim? Do there need to be snacks? Figure out the space that works for you and give yourself that time and that space and take care of yourself in that way. And reward yourself for starting. Because if we're in the habit of dreading starting our tasks and getting into procrastination spirals, we probably maybe associate starting tasks with a lot of negativity. So it can help to begin associating starting a task or completing a task with positive reinforcement. Because even though completing a task might fire up our reward centers in our brains, it's the starting that gets us sometimes. So if there's I started a task, I can have my reward. Retrain those reward centers. Show that your brain that this is what good things happen when we do this. So let's do more of this. So, last question, what can you start today? These are my sources. A little article. There's a YouTube channel called How to ADHD. She is great. There is a book called Spark, which is about physical activity and how it relates to different mental issues, ADHD, anxiety, depression, stress. A lot of science in there. There's the circadian code, really great. And so, anyway, questions?
No, I'm procrastinating, not wanting to fold my laundry, so. At least when she's procrastinating, she's getting something accomplished. I know, go clean something if I'm procrastinating. I start music up or something if I need to clean the house. Just to try to make myself go, oh,
There you
I'm
go.
energized now, let's go do it.
Yeah, there you go, exactly.
I have a huge habit of when I have a whole list of things to do and there are some that I'm not sure of, I will actually pick all of the other things, even though these other things are really important and probably more important than what I'm picking. I pick the ones that I'm good at.
Yes.
And I stay busy so I don't feel lazy, but
Yes.
I'm also not accomplishing the things that I need to accomplish.
Isn't that clever? Isn't that a clever thing that
Sounds
you're
like
doing?
you had a whole nother list just so you wouldn't have to do the same thing.
I did. I do. I really do. I will, at the gym, for instance, I will absolutely, if I have this thing that needs to be done on the computer, that barbell needs to be cleaned. The bathroom trash needs to go out. This person needs help with their form. I could totally mop the floor right now instead of sending one email.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I make these
right
whole
back.
lists that turn into, yeah, welcome to my brain.
It's like Cribs. So my name's Jordan. Welcome to my brain.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. If any of you would like to visit, you can stay, Holly.
Well, did any of that? It sounds like some of it rang true.
Oh yeah, for me, a lot of it did. I am diagnosed ADHD, and I refuse to take medication. It makes me feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having to find other coping
Yes.
mechanisms.
What about of the things that were suggested, did any of them sound worthwhile or like something that you might try out or put in practice?
Yeah, sometimes rewarding yourself at work.
Oh yeah.
Depending on what you're doing, what the reward might be.
I actually accidentally discovered one of the things we talked about this morning because I did my workout and then I came here and got in one of the little shelf spaces that is quiet and started studying, and I felt like I was doing better than previous 10.
Okay.
So within an hour of working out, I was here studying, and like previous attempts have failed miserably. But I was actually in the zone and like, okay, I can memorize this.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. So we've got some anecdotal evidence here.
Yeah.
I love it.
Accidental anecdotal evidence. Because
That's
I was
right.
just like, this is how my day's gonna go, and now it's gonna go like that from now on.
Yeah, I find it gets more difficult for me the later it is in the day from when I actually got to move around. It gets harder.
And I just coach all these ladies right after they're done with work. So they just yell at me all the time. It's okay if they don't.
And then we go home and go to bed.
If they don't yell at me, I'm not doing it right. I welcome it. All right, so we are done a little early, so any other questions, or we're gonna go ahead and, yeah, everybody stand up.
Yeah,
Let's do a little bit of stretching.
we're gonna do a little stretching.
I just don't want to do it.
Well, what do you need? Are you anxious about being perfect at it? Because no judgment here.
We're just gonna do basics. Big inhale, reach the ceiling. Exhale, push those hips towards the wall behind you, forward fold, and hang out here. Let's get into those hamstrings after sitting for a few minutes. When you're ready, you're gonna roll one vertebra at a time up. Your head's the last thing to come all the way back up. We're gonna take that 2 more times at your own pace. Big deep inhale. Exhale, forward fold. Roll it up when you're ready. All right, on your last time rolling it up, you're gonna pick an arm, it doesn't matter which one, but you're gonna pull it across your chest. And then you're gonna turn the palm of the arm straight out away from your body so that you feel the stretch in the back of your shoulder. You're just gonna remember to breathe here. I tend to, when I get uncomfortable in a stretch, I just hold my breath. I'm gonna try not to do that now. We're gonna switch in 5, 4, 3, 2, switch side.
That means now you exist. Do it. You know. He counts down this time.
I did. I threw a wrench in the system. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, drop it down, Tai Chi twist. All right. Everybody grab onto the back of your chair. We're going to stretch our quad a little bit. We're going to do that by grabbing onto our foot and then pulling our knee under our hip.
Come on, come on, people.
There you go.
Oh, we had a chair to hold on to.
All right. When you're ready, we're going to switch sides. You got this.
Thought about getting everyone to meditate afterwards. I was like, well, they've been sitting for a long time.
We're gonna snort.
All right. When you're ready, we're dropping that down. We're going to go back to the upper body and stretch out our triceps. We're going to take one hand overhead, grab that elbow, and then try and touch the middle of your back. When we switch sides, not yet, but when we do, that'll be the last thing we're going to do. That should get you nice and warmed up and woken up before we head back off for work day. And switch sides. All right, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Couple more Tai Chi twists. And then I think we're going to go ahead and close it out if nobody has any other questions.
Yay.
Y'all ready? See you for the rest of the day.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to restudy all of these slides. That's the thing that's going to
I
happen.
took a picture of them. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone on Zoom.
I see you this evening, Jordan.
I will be here with bells on.